Good morning. Today is Friday, January 16th, and my name is Michael Conley. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations of the North Reading Public Schools. And today I thought we would spend a few moments, talking a little bit about where the status of the FY19 school budget is and what some of the key dates are of our budget process. And then look a little bit at the state budget as the governor released his budget this week, and the Chapter 70, educational aid numbers were released this week as well. And I thought it would be a good time to just kind of take a look at all this information and see where we're at. So reflected here is the key dates of the budget calendar. The next couple months, January and February, will be the school administration along with the school committee will be working hard to develop a preliminary budget proposal. That preliminary budget is due to be presented on Monday, March 12th. At that time, the budget will be posted on the school website and made available to the public. Here's some other key dates are reflected here. Monday, April 9th is the annual public hearing on the FY19 budget that will be held in the Distance Learning Lab at 6:30 p.m. We will hold some internal budget workshops with the school committee to make some edits and continue to discuss the budget. And the school committee is not due to vote a recommended budget until Monday, April 30th. And then the town meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 4th, 2018. So the state budget was released on Wednesday, January 24th. So that provides us with some initial good insight and information on where the state is, and a lot of times some of the state challenges and how the state is funding their budget. Also, crosses over to some of the local challenges that and revenue that will be certainly impact our budget here as a community in North Reading. So Chapter 70 is obviously the aid that school districts receive for education. The governor increased Chapter 70 by $103 million, which was about a 2.2% increase. The governor's proposal does make efforts to add funding in the foundation budget for things like health insurance and benefit costs as part of the Foundation Commission's recommendation. So there was certainly progress made on that front. So there was an increase, and I'll talk about in a moment how those increases impact North Reading. Unrestricted local general aid also increased by about 3.5%, so there was an increase there as well, about $37.2 million. The other key educational accounts, like the Special Education Circuit Breaker Program, which is a reimbursement program. Once districts spend over a certain threshold for students in out-of-district programs, we receive a level of reimbursement for that. That amount increased by $10 million, so it's currently funded at $291 million, which should lead to about a 65 to 70% reimbursement rate, but that rate has not been set yet, so we'll have to stay tuned with some more information on Circuit Breaker. Some other key educational accounts, charter reimbursements, regional transportation, and homeless transportation, all of which don't have a huge impact or impact North Reading. Those were level funded. So the governor has released their budget. Some of the next steps in that process is that it then would move on to the House and then to the Senate, and then the conference committee would not officially approve their budget until mid to late June. So there's certainly a long way to go, but this represents certainly a starting point, and it's interesting to see what where the state is at with their budget. If you want more information, you can click on this link here, and that will bring you to the Mass Budget website where they have published a preview of the fiscal year 2009 state budget. So now if we get into the Chapter 70 program and kind of how it impacts North Reading. So this was published on Wednesday evening. And if you look at the numbers and the trends in the trend in North Reading, when you look at our Chapter 70 program, it's really, the first step that happens in this formula is the foundation budget is calculated in each district. What this represents is a minimum spending level needed to provide kind of an adequate education. It's adjusted each year based on changes in enrollment, changes in student demographic data, whether it be grade levels, low income status, economically disadvantaged status, as well as in inflation. So there's an inflationary factor that's provided. But those are the two main factors, both inflation and changes in your student enrollment for the students that you're financially responsible for will have the biggest impact in your foundation budget. And in the case of North Reading, we had a significant, rather good sizable increase in our foundation budget from FY18 to FY19. I think the largest factors there is that, as you can see, our foundation enrollment stayed relatively the same, so we didn't really experience a huge impact based on changes in enrollment. The largest factor there was that the inflationary factor, which was set at over 2% in FY19, is helping drive that number up, as well as the increase in the health insurance and the benefit costs. So the governor funded that amount, added additional funds in the health insurance budget, foundation budget, factor to certainly drive foundation budget up. So that's a good progress made there. That certainly would help all districts. And then what the step two in the process is they calculate what the community can afford. This is known as the required district contribution. This represents the amount of local appropriation needed to meet our required net school spending. So that amount gets calculated, and then the third step is then you determine the amount of Chapter 70 aid. This represents the amount of state aid to finance the state share of the foundation budget, which is generally composed of foundation aid and or minimum aid. So one thing to note, that the sum of your local contribution plus your Chapter 70 aid, these two numbers here, always equal what our required net school spending number. Now, typically, in most cases, or in the ideal case, is your required net school spending number would match or be very close to your foundation budget. If that's the case, then districts are being funded at their target share. So North Reading is a 17.5% community or target, which is actually represents the minimum target of a district. So in the eyes of the Chapter 70 formula that looks at various statistics like median income and property values and so forth, North Reading is actually considered a rather an affluent community, as we have a minimum target aid share of 17.5%. So North Reading's actual percent of Chapter 70 funding of foundation is actually a lot higher than the target of 17.5%. In FY19, it's a little over 28%. So that is actually a key piece of information, as it actually shows that we're, in the eyes of the formula, receiving more Chapter 70 aid than the formula says we should. So therefore, we're required to spend more money, which is the reason why our required net school spending money amount is that much higher than our foundation budget. And also part of the reason why we tend to always, in North Reading, unfortunately, kind of default to minimum aid. We have not qualified for foundation aid when changes to the formula have taken place over the last several years. And the foundation, the minimum aid this year was funded at $20 per student. So that's why you're seeing our Chapter 78 go up by $48,500. The governor funded that at $20 per student. So you take $20 times our foundation enrollment of $2,425, and that equals the increase of $48,500. So this chart shows you just what's been happening in North Reading. Because of that dynamic that I just spoke of, the fact that we are a community that is, in the eyes of the formula release, higher than our target, that 28% compared to the 17.5%. When there has been changes or efforts by the state to fund the foundation budget at at increased levels for things like health insurance, special education, out of district costs, all these things that the Chapter 70 commission, which was a group that worked on making improvements to the formula. When those efforts are made by the state, we haven't quite seen the benefit of that because of that dynamic of where we are at in relation to our target. So we've kind of, over the last several years, you can see, defaulted to what they refer to as minimum aid. So you can see these years where typically it's funded around, the minimum aid's been $25 per student. So 14, 15, and 16, it was very consistent. 17, there was a big push to increase that minimum amount per pupil, and I think it went up to about $55 per student. That's why you see we got some additional Chapter 70 in that fiscal year. That's why you saw an increase. I believe last year they ended up settling at $30 per student. And then this past fiscal 19, it's set at $20 per student, which is kind of which would be the lowest it's been in a number of years. But that could change as the Senate and the House and the conference committee get involved in the process. Hopefully we see that number increase to a level of at least 25, 30, or what it's been the last couple of years. FY12, you saw no Chapter 70 aid increases. That was because that was the last year where there was kind of ERA funds and educational job funds, available to districts. There were no increases that year. So moving on, this just shows you that same trend and statistic that I just spoke of. This is North Reading data that just shows what our actual Chapter 70 aid is as a percent of our foundation budget and where we are at in our target. So because we are just, in the eyes of the formula, again, so far above the target, we're in a situation where we're not, at the moment, going to see significant increases in Chapter 70. We'll most likely default to the minimum amount per pupil that is set. So, until, there are major changes or major, overhauls of that formula, this is kind of the trend that we're likely to see. That's, what I just showed you has taken place over the last several years. So now if you look at this pie chart, line graph, which I've pulled in some other communities in the area, and you can just see where these area communities that surround North Reading, where they are also are in relation to their target age share. Most of these communities are considered affluent communities and are all minimum aid communities, 17.5% communities, and most of them are much closer to their target of 17.5% than others. As you can see, North Reading is the furthest away. We're about over 10%, almost 11% higher than our target. Reading is the next district that's about 7-8% higher than their target aid. A community like Wakefield and even Linfield are much closer to their target. So those districts, when there are major changes to the Chapter 70 formula, if things are funded at higher levels in the foundation to drive the foundation budget up and so forth, they will see larger increases in Chapter 70, whereas a community like North Reading and even Reading would see a lower increase because of where we are in relation to our target. But I think oftentimes this statistic, when we're looking at the Chapter 70 formula, kind of goes overlooked. And that also would relate to, when we're looking at the full-day kindergarten conversation and making changes in whether or not we offer free universal full-day kindergarten. North Reading as a community, because of this trend and this where we are in relation to our target, we are not someone that would see a significant increase by making a significant change like that in Chapter 70 funds. So if you look at the budget And some of the trends and the challenges that have been the case over the last couple of years continue to exist. It's early on in the process, but we are seeing a gap that does exist right now, and that is because our local revenue sources, obviously taxes, state aid, local receipts, just simply are not increasing at the same level or the same pace as fixed costs. Fixed costs are Medicare, health insurance, liability insurance, retirement costs. So we have a situation where there's a structural problem where, property taxes are capped at 2.5%. There's not a significant level of huge new growth that in North Reading, and these other revenue sources, state aid, like I just talked about, through Chapter 70, and even government unrestricted local aid and local receipts are relatively flat. And then we have a situation where we have healthcare costs increasing anywhere between 4 and 8%, and these other fixed cost line items increasing between 5 and 7% or greater each year. So it presents that structural challenge, which why early on in every process, there's a structural budget gap that does exist. And that same can be said at the state level as well as at the local level here in North Reading. So we are just starting our process, as I said earlier. So if you're looking for some information about the budget along the process, here are some helpful ways where you can get that information. The budget calendar is online. This link would bring you to the budget page on our website. So you can certainly follow along the budget process by going directly to the North Reading website. This is my Twitter account, so I'll also be posting information on Twitter and so forth throughout the process. So this is all information that is readily available to you and is readily on the school website, for instance. So if I take you quickly to the school website, you can get a sense of where this information is housed. So again, if you just go to district administration, click on the budget page, all the information that you would need to follow the process to follow the FY19 budget is posted here. These links are all hyperlinked, so as information is presented and finalized, it's posted here, and it's really a good resource for a lot of key information. So with that being said, I hope this provided you with some good initial information on the budget process here in North Reading. Again, it's very early on, but there'll be more information forthcoming as we move throughout the process. Great, thank you very much.